Again, good morning to everybody. Welcome to this webinar, one of our monthly webinars of the National Shelter Movement of South Africa. For those of you who joined for the first time, I'm NSMSA, the National Coordinator of the National Shelter Movement of South Africa. Successfully, we've been running these monthly workshops for over 2 years now, and they've really grown. I'm glad to see that we've got a nice group of participants. We're almost under 100. It's an important topic this morning. Pornography, child sexual exploitation and abuse is a big part of domestic violence, plays a big part in gender-based violence. It's something that we cannot ignore. There's always overlaps. As a sheltering organization, a gender equality organization, we know that often women come to shelters with their children. So, we cannot exclude that element. So we've got Marita Rademeyer from Jelly Beanz this morning to present on the topic. I'm going to introduce her now. What we want to look at this morning is how children are exposed to pornography. What are the effects of pornography on children, on families, and how professionals can work with children in dealing with their trauma. So thank you, Ms. Rademeyer, for joining us this morning. We also have an interesting program ahead, but before I hand you over to Ms. Rademeyer, I'm going to quickly introduce you formally to her. Ms. Rademeyer is a clinical psychologist with more than 30 years experience in assessment and treatment of children, adolescents, and families. She holds a BA in psychology, honors and masters from what is now called the University of Johannesburg. I know back then it was the Rand Afrikaans University, and has operated with child trauma clinic in Pretoria since 2001, which is over 25 years now. So you can see Ms. Rademeyer's experience is so vast, and we are honored to have her here this morning. Her clinical work focuses on trauma, abuse, developmental and psychiatric disorders, harmful sexual behaviors, child protection matters, and high conflict family cases. Ms. Rademeyer is the co-founder and chairperson of Jelly Beanz, a non-profit organization that provides therapeutic services to children and families affected by trauma and abuse. She has consulted to government departments and international organizations, including UNICEF, Interpol, ECPA, the PAT, FHI 360, and has contributed to the development of child protection programs, training curricula, policy frameworks. She has authored training materials and publications presented nationally and internationally, and trained multidisciplinary professionals in child protection, trauma, and child mental health. So a very warm welcome to you, Ms. Rademeyer. I know in your busy schedule, thank you for making time for us this morning. I know we're going to leave here with a wealth of information. So over to you, Ms. Rademeyer.
Thank you very much, Anissa. I really appreciate your hearty introduction. And I'm so excited to see that we've got so many people who've joined us today for this presentation. I see we're almost close to 120 participants. That's really very exciting. I wonder if you could please allow me to screen share. Oh, brilliant. I think you've done that for me already. All right. If all goes well, you should be seeing my presentation in front of you. Anissa, can you see the presentation?
Yes, we can, Ms. Rademeyer. Yes, thank you.
Someone sent me a thumbs up. Anissa, I wonder if I can maybe ask you if you would just keep an eye out for questions in the comments section, and just interrupt me if there's a question that you think I need to address immediately.
Sure, I will do that. You can just advise me if you want to address questions after certain sections, or you're okay to just
I'm happy, I'm happy for people to, if you can just curate the comments, I'm happy for
Okay.
people to pop questions in as we go along. I think that's going to keep the presentation more lively as well.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. I will do
Thank
that.
you. Thank you very much. So today we're going to be talking about coming to terms with children's use of pornography. And I think the first thing we need to say to each other is that those of us who were born before the internet have a certain view of what pornography is. Um, Many of us, I remember, well, me for one, grew up with magazines wrapped in plastic that the boy children used to buy from corner stores, and they would have photographs at most of breasts in them. So many of us believe that pornography is not really such a big problem for our children, and we tend to think that it's more harmless. But what is an actual fact happening is that the majority, really, of pornography portrays some kind of violence and some kind of aggression, especially against women, but also in same sex pornography material. There's generally one person who is being aggressed against. So, what our children are viewing is not just photographs and videos of people having consensual intercourse. As a matter of fact, most of them at some point in their viewing of pornography will come across physical or verbal violence, and women being portrayed as the target of that violence. And that is really very concerning. So I wonder if you would like to pop in the comments question. Children under 10 account for how many visitors to pornography sites? Would you say that 1 out of 10 visitors is a child under 10? 1 out of 100? Or 1 out of 500 visitors to a pornography site would be a child 10 and under? I wonder if you can answer that question for us and just pop that in the chat box. And while you do that, you'll see on your screen just a reference to a guide that we wrote 2 years ago, South African Children and Pornography. And that resource is available for free on our website. So there's a PDF that you can download. If you're close to our office in Cape Town or our office in Pretoria, you're welcome to pop by and collect a hard copy of the guide. Otherwise, you can download the PDF. All right. I think, colleagues, you'll be shocked to know that 1 out of 10 visitors to pornography sites is a child of 10 and under. I'm sure that this is very shocking to you, as it is to me. So when we're working with children who are exposed to pornography, some of them will have limited exposure. So some of these children would have seen something every now and again. Very typically, children gather at schools and they would show pornographic materials to other children. So this would be an example of limited exposure. So a child who's been exposed once, twice, 3 times. But then we find that limited exposure can become regular use very quickly. So regular use happens when children are accessing intentionally, they're accessing the pornographic materials intentionally, and that happens over a period of time. And regular use can become compulsive use in a very short, scarily short period of time, where children access pornography, even if they are disgusted by what they're accessing, even if they know what they're doing is bad for them or is wrong, they can no longer help themselves. So that is when the regular use can become compulsive use. And I think what's really important to know is that limited exposure can become regular use, and regular use can become compulsive use in a very short period of time. We're going to be talking about this a little bit later on in the presentation again, But pornography consumption in children has a very wide-ranging effect. It's not only has an effect on the sexual development of the child, but it also has an effect on the cognitive development of a child. And we find very often the children are brought to us in practice, and the concern expressed by parents or caregivers or teachers is that this child is no longer, this child used to perform well, used to play soccer with his friends, and all of a sudden the school marks are dropping. The child is no longer interested in taking part in sport. The child is irritable, losing his temper quickly. And then we find that there's not a learning disability or a learning problem happening here. There's not necessarily anything happening at home, but this child is accessing pornography compulsively. And that is something that we see quite often. Before COVID, we would generally see this with boy children, grade 7 very often. But after COVID and the fact that the children are accessing online activities more, we're seeing this with even younger children. And what I think is the biggest headache for us working in the field is that children under the age of 12 who use pornography, in other words, our young children, are more likely to abuse their siblings sexually, and they're also more likely to show harmful sexual behaviors towards other children in their environment. So the younger the child is when they start accessing pornography compulsively, the more likely they are to act out sexually what they're seeing. Please remember, we're not talking about children who have limited exposure to pornography. Those are not the children who are going to, or in all probability, not the children who are going to act out sexually, but the children who are using pornography regularly or compulsively are the children who are in danger here of acting out sexually towards others. I wanted to share with you a literature review that was done, and it looked at 46 different studies where they looked at using MRI and EEG signals, flow MRI and EEG signals. So they were looking at two different ways of measuring what's happening in the brains of children. And these were the 46 different studies. Were looking at children who had self-identified, in other words, who had told the researchers, I am using pornography compulsively. And this literature review pinpointed that children who are using pornography compulsively are showing differences in the flow MRI, and the flow MRI is the more sophisticated way of measuring what's happening in the brain, showed differences, quantitative, visible differences on the MRI scans in these different parts of the brain, 6 different parts of the brain. And I'm sure you'll agree with me that this is very concerning because we're looking at many of the very important parts of the brain. If you have a look, the prefrontal cortex is your good idea, not good idea part of the brain, and it has to do with decision making, has really very important in terms of getting along with other people, with studying, with learning, the brainstem, and all of these other areas of the brain. It's really very concerning that we're finding quantitative differences in the brains between children who have self-identified as compulsive users and children who are not using pornography. So I think the importance of this study for me is that the jury is definitely out. We know that it is harmful to children's brain development to be using pornography compulsively.
Sorry, Marita, we've got
Yes.
a hand up, and I'm not sure if it's Sandra, but Sandra has a comment. Do you want to take it now?
I would love to hear Sandra's comment.
Sandra, do you want to unmute and just share?
Yeah. Thank you, Rademeyer. I have a comment. I've worked in rural community development projects in early childhood development as a coordinator. And I promise you, every day I had to play every role, being a lawyer, being a counselor, and I've faced a lot of sibling sexual abuse, just like what you've mentioned. And I've seen the community, I've seen the family dynamics, and it's what these children see in their own families and in their own homes, that they repeatedly practice this with their siblings. And sadly enough, it's still going on. But what I've noticed now in my same role as a community leader and as a doctor in community services, also it's happening more now in urban areas where children are actually practicing and modeling, the behavior of their parents. And some parents seem to accept it as normal. And I am fighting a no winning battle, trying to teach and create awareness and educate the masses on sibling, sexual abuse is not a norm and it's not normal. And these generational curses need to break. And it's left onto us as leaders, yourself and the panel as well, to do more in making sure that we reach our target and try to combat these kinds of crimes against our vulnerable citizens. Because the child may seem to be a victim, but actually, both are victims. In this case scenario, it will be the perpetrator who's one child and the victim who's the other child. But in this case scenario, it will be both are victims to what they witness in their own homes. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. You touched on two things that I'd just like to comment on. I think the first thing is that you're in a rural community, and just to mention that children in rural communities have about the same coverage in terms of internet. They might not have the same amount of hours that they can go on the internet, or they might not have the same quality of service delivery in terms of the quality of the internet. But there's at this point no in South Africa, not a big difference between rural children and urban children in terms of how they're accessing the internet and therefore in terms of accessing pornography. The second thing I just want to comment on is that we in the field of harmful sexual behaviors, we would speak about an actor and a victim. So we would try to stay away from language such as perpetrator, because I agree with you, indeed, both children are victims of having been exposed to inappropriate content, whether that is adult sexual activity or whether that is what they've seen on pornography sites. So thank you for your comment. I think what's really
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Marita.
Thanks. I think what's really significant, if we look at what's happening in South Africa, is from 2006 to 2021, the third most researched topic was how to make love. And how to make love is definitely not something that an adult is going to put into Google. So this shows us that one of the top 10 searches, at least number 3, is how to make love. And that would probably, in all probability, be children who are turning to the internet for information about sexuality, which is something that we're going to be looking at again a little bit later in this presentation. Also, just to say that women are using pornography and girl children are using pornography. We sometimes think that it's only a domain of men, but as you can see over here, and the statistic is actually quite old, 7 years old already, 37% of South African Pornhub viewers in 2019 were women. So our female viewership of pornography is definitely much higher than we would think.
Marita, sorry, we have a hand from Nombulelo. Nombulelo, before we go on to the next slide, Nombulelo, do you want to unmute and share? Nombulelo? I don't know if you have any sound issues. If not, if you want to put something in the chat, you can free to do that and we'll pick up as we go along. Rita, I think we can continue. If I pick up something from Nombolelo, I will alert you.
Thank you very much. What I've learned over the years in working with children who access pornography intentionally is that parents are generally the last to know when their children have a problem. And this can be very devastating for parents when they pick up a child's phone, or they check on what's happening, or someone at the school lets them know that their child has been viewing inappropriate material. It can be very traumatizing for parents to see what their children have been busy with. And if children have been accessing pornography over a period of time, they're definitely not watching vanilla pornography anymore, because they can go into seeing really very disturbing material in a relatively short period of time. We also find that children actively hide their tracks if they're using pornography intentionally. So they learn very quickly and early on how to delete their search history. In much the same way as someone who smokes would minimize their use of tobacco by saying, oh, I only smoke 20 cigarettes a day, where in actual fact it's more than that. Children minimize their involvement in pornography. So they would often say to you, no, it's only been the past 2 months that I've been watching, or I only watch once a week. So we don't necessarily at the beginning of engaging with a child know exactly the extent of the problem. We also know that you cannot talk children out of using pornography. Very often parents' knee-jerk reaction is to take the phone away, punish the child very harshly, and then sincerely hope that something is going to change. Punishment doesn't change the behavior. As a matter of fact, it often sends it underground when children are accessing pornography regularly or compulsively. So what I've learned over the years in working with young people is that I would ask, what pornography have you seen? And some children would then tell you what they've seen. Other children would ask, what is pornography? And then I would explain pornography as photographs or videos of naked people. And you'll be very shocked to hear some of the responses that I've had from children. One little boy of 6-year-old said to me, oh yes, I've seen naked people fighting on the ground. And I asked, can you tell me, how did you know they were fighting? He said, no, because they were naked and they were wrestling on the ground and they were making fighting noises. So I think it's safer when you're working with children to make questions about pornography part of the way that you get the history and explore a child's world. So I want to, in the next few slides, look a little bit at why pornography is so harmful. We've said that it's very highly addictive, and we also know that it can be very shocking and traumatizing to children, especially if they're watching animal pornography to do with animals, rape pornography, any kind of traumatizing pornography can leave children with PTSD-like symptoms because of what they've seen and what they've heard. And we know one specific study shows us that children who are exposed to pornography young have significantly more depression in adulthood, and that it can have we looked at that slide a little bit earlier on, can have an effect on the child's thinking. What is particularly concerning is that most children use pornography as the main source of sex education. So they learn about sex and sexuality from the pornography industry rather than learning about sex and sexuality from a trusted adult, from a caregiver, or from a parent. And this is especially true because children can be exposed to pornography before parents decide to have the birds and the bees conversation with them. And especially in South Africa, there are so many taboos around proper sex education. And this is a very big hurdle for us in dealing with harmful sexual behaviors in children, because many parents say it's the responsibility of the school to give my child this information, or they would say, I don't want to give my child ideas about sex and sexuality, or my child's not old enough yet for the conversation. And what happens is that children go to Dr. Google with their questions and are then exposed to inappropriate materials rather than going to their own parents when they have questions about sexuality. And children learn very distorted lessons. They learn that women need to be subservient. They often learn that women enjoy harsh sexual activity. Just to
Sorry,
give
Marita. Also, don't to miss anything from the chat. So I see it related to that. Dr. Shaida Umar has also posted in the chat that children use cognitive distortions to minimize the act as a safety, as a defense mechanism, and then also related to parents. There's a comment in the group about parents choosing to be ignorant, also probably as a coping mechanism. Thank you for the shares. Sorry for the interruption, Marita.
Thank you, Vanessa. I really welcome these comments because I think they make the presentation interesting. Thank you. I've got one example for you, and this is from Vogue, Teen Vogue. So Teen Vogue, especially in United States and in Europe, is a mainstream magazine that children can buy wherever they buy, whatever else. So it's really a mainstream publication. And very interestingly, in 2019, it carried an article on how teenagers should prepare themselves, girl children, for anal sex. So there were tips on how-tos. And I think what is really concerning is that pornography really shows anal sex as a very normal, expected version of goodness, now I can't think of the English word, of sex between girls and boys. So boy children believe, because they watch pornography, that this is what girl children want. And girl children believe, because they also watch pornography, either with their boyfriends or on their own, that this is what boy children would prefer. And I find it extremely concerning that a mainstream publication should want to educate young girls on how to go about stretching their anuses so as to accommodate anal sex with partners, because this is not, this is something that is born out of pornography exposure. And this is just to illustrate to you how what is happening in the pornography industry becomes normalized and then finds its way into mainstream media. All right, as we can expect, children who use pornography compulsively are also engaging in more unhealthy and damaging sexual behaviors. And girl children, interestingly, who are watching pornography were twice as likely in one study to be sexually active than girls who did not. And this is especially true the younger children are when they are exposed to pornography, and especially under the age of 12. We find that the effects of early regular exposure to pornography are extremely harmful to children.
So, Marita, Selena Palm also related to, okay, so developmental related matters when it comes to pornography and sexuality. She's saying that this may come up later in the presentation, but I'm interested to hear how Marita would distinguish between natural age-related sexual play and sexual and body curiosity, which has often been demonized, especially on religious settings, and harmful sexual behaviors. Do children often go to the internet for porn in order to access information on sex education? And I think that you mentioned a little, touched on. Okay, let me just see if I've covered all of that. Access information on sex education, that they are not being offered by trusted adults, that is parents or schools, due to a wider desire to desexualize children and those taboos that have just been mentioned.
And I think that is, just to pick up on that comment, Anissa, I think it's particularly damaging to not give children proper sexuality, to have proper sexuality conversations with children from when they're young, because pornography exposure is becoming so prevalent. And it's not only pornography exposure, but also sexualized materials and sexualized images that children come across, even in mainstream media. If parents and caregivers don't fulfill the role of giving their children timely information and guidance on sex and sexuality, children are going to get that information from other sources. And very often you would find children going on Dr. Google, they hear something. One of my clients, for instance, a grade 6 boy, heard of a sex toy, and he didn't go to his mom or his dad. He went to Google and then obviously came across a site on sex toys, and from there on was taken into a pornography site directly, and which was very traumatizing for him and traumatizing for the parents as well. So it's very important that parents and caregivers establish themselves as the go-to people for children. A child should know mom or dad or gogo or whoever is my go-to person if I have a question. That otherwise they are going to go to Google and they are going to get very damaging information, which leads us into the next slide. And one of the reasons why I was so worried.
Before you do, Marita, Dr. Shada Umar also about anal sex. She's saying that it's also a means of protecting them from virginity testing, which we're observing in the indigenous populations. So that's also quite an important observation. Thank you, Dr. Shada Umar.
Yes, thank you. Hi, Shada. It's lovely to have you here. We were in a meeting together yesterday, so it's lovely to know that you made time to be here. I appreciate that. Leading us into the next slide, if children are exposed to pornography, they believe that violence is a very accepted part of sex. And what is concerning about this is not only do they believe violence is part of sex, but they also believe that women enjoy violence. Because if you look at many of the most viewed pornography images, you'll find an expression of pleasure on the woman's face when she is being aggressed against. So violence is seen as part of the sexual experience, and children believe that this is something that is wanted by women, and that is really very concerning. And this, of course, leads into distortions in intimate relationships, where boys believe girls want violent sex, and girls believe boys want it, and boys believe girls want it. So we then have, coming from two different perspectives, the expectation about sex and sexuality is no longer that it's an intimate and pleasing and a loving act, but that it is one of violence. And I think what we have to say to each other is that the pornography industry has realized that it can make money out of children. And something that you'll see on many of the platforms, especially on OnlyFans and on Pornhub, is that there are challenge-related searches. And these challenges are put together to entrap children and to get children into the pornography, these specific platforms. So it's really very concerning that the pornography industry is actively hunting for child participants. OnlyFans, just to mention that OnlyFans has overtook Pornhub as one of the biggest platforms of pornography. OnlyFans, you find very often that the actors in OnlyFans would act out teenage boy fantasies aimed directly at getting teenage viewership to increase. So the question I'm often asked is, how do children start watching pornography? So a child may be shown pornography by someone who is grooming them, but the majority of children are exposed quite unintentionally. They mistype a word. For instance, one of my clients put into Google Californian newt, N-E-W-T, which is a little reptile, and was then taken to a site showing Californian nudes. My own child, who's now 23, when she was in grade 5, she and a friend were playing with a tablet that didn't have software on it, and they had harvested lavender in her little friend's garden, and they wanted to Google how to make lavender perfume. They got to how to make L, and Google auto-corrected them into how to make love. Fortunately, my child, because her mom is completely paranoid, took the tablet to her friend's mom and said, "This is what we've come across." But already my child had seen images of people having sexual activity. So we find that many children are exposed unintentionally. And sometimes children would also come across pornography through, they were looking intentionally. One of my clients was watching Friends with her family, and at some point someone said, "Joey," I'm sure you'll remember, "Joey is a porn machine." And she entered porn machine because she didn't know what that was. Sadly, she came across a pornography website as well. And something that we find very often is that children are given a second-hand instrument, a phone that had belonged to someone else, and then there's pornographic material on that. We're seeing in schools that if one child has accessed pornography, they often want to share that with other children. So they would actively introduce others to pornography by taking their smartphones to school. And other children tend to also have conversations about pornography. And I think this is something that you only know once you start asking children the right questions. Children talk about what they are exposed to as much as they talk about gaming or about soccer or about whatever it is in their living environment. Once they've accessed pornography, they will also talk about that. And in that way, children become curious and they go and have a look for themselves as well. We also found that older siblings, older cousins can expose younger siblings and friends of younger siblings to pornography. We find that once children...
Marita, Itumeleng has a question.
Yeah.
Sorry. Itumeleng has a question. Is there evidence that boy children viewers of porn can become future rapists?
Sure. let's just focus on the harmful. Yes, that's quite a loaded question. So if you look at harmful sexual behaviors, boy children and girl children, I think it's important to not demonize boy children. We know that girl children access pornography, and we know that girl children can be actors in harmful sexual behaviors as well. And if we look at boy children, we know from the Optimist Foundation study that the sexual abuse of boy children is actually a percentage point or so more than the sexual abuse of girl children. So we must remember to see our girl children as potential actors, and we must remember to recognize that our boy children are victims of sexual abuse as often or sometimes more often than our girl children. So I think it's important to keep a balanced view in terms of the gendered aspect. But the research shows very clearly that children under the age of 12 who are accessing pornography regularly or compulsively are at a higher risk of showing harmful sexual behaviors towards other children. So we don't even have to look at the future. We can look at the present and know that these children are at risk of showing these harmful behaviors. And that's why it's so important for me to work on the prevention of pornography exposure and getting timely help for children who are exposed to pornography, because we are not only preventing exposure to something that's extremely harmful, we're also preventing harmful sexual behaviors. And I think that's why, one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about this topic, and why, if I get invited to speak about it, I almost always say yes, because in as much as we are working with gender-based violence and we're working with harmful sexual behavior, one of the most important drivers of harmful sexual behaviors and gender-based violence, in my opinion, is the pornography industry. So I hope that I've shed some light on that question. And I'm sure in the time that I've spoken, oh, good, I see some thumbs up. I like that. In the time that I've spoken now, I'm sure you've gone through the content of this slide. I just want to take a minute to talk about the video games that are becoming more of a gateway to pornography. Roblox is a very popular game, which is played by a lot of children and is seen as quite harmless by many parents. On Roblox, you will find, and you're welcome to go and Google this, or don't, you can just take my word for it. You'll find that there's a variation of it. It's called condo, as in condominium, kind of a dwelling, where you find pornographic illustrated. So it's not real people, but you'll find pornographic and very suggestive material on Roblox. So, and Roblox, as I mentioned, is seen as quite harmless by a lot of parents and caregivers. So we have to be really thoughtful of what our children are watching and what they're playing. On Steam, one of the biggest platforms for gaming, you can find sex shop games, where you can literally, instead of having a pizza shop, you can have a sex shop, build a sex shop. You've got your products and people can come in and make purchases from you. So we have to be really careful and realize that children can be exposed to harmful sexual content even on video games. All right.
Marita, you've got a hand from Rahul. Rahul, do you want to unmute and share, ask, comment? Rahul, I see your hand has disappeared. Does that mean your question or comment has been attended to? While I'm on, Marita, Dr. Shaida Umar has also commented that the history of victimization can contribute to victims becoming victimizers if they have not received any support to address their trauma. And I think also that the Teddy Bear Foundation, See Children in the Dark version program, we have a history of victimization. So just about victimization. So thank you, Dr. Shaida Umar.
Thank you very much. If Rahul comes back, you're welcome to just give me the heads up, Anissa. So sometimes children react to pornography exposure in different ways. Some children become very secretive and they don't share, but some children become wanting to, we call them externalized users. They are the children who want to share and tell their friends what they're busy with. So it's important to know that children can react in different ways where after they've been exposed, but the majority of the children do not seek adult help or support. They might ask their friends for help, or they might pass on some of the inappropriate materials, but they do not necessarily approach an adult. And that brings us right back to why adults should be establishing themselves as the go-to people for children. I just want to pause at this slide very quickly and say that pornography has very special addictive qualities. If you think about alcohol, you have to drink it. It has to go down your throat, your esophagus, go into your stomach, has to be digested, go into your bloodstream, pass the blood-brain barrier, and then you'll start feeling the effects. Pornography, you can access the material through your eyes, the visual cortex. It's milliseconds before that information goes straight into your brain. So it's almost instantaneous, whereas with many other things, it takes time. All right, we've spoken about
Marita,
that.
Linda's got, I think, a question asking basically, is the birds and bees talk enough if children don't get the help they need once exposed to pornography?
The birds and the bees should happen, in my opinion, before children enter formal schooling. So by about age 5 or 6, children should parents should start having these conversations with children. And one of the resources, our amazing buddies, that you'll also find on our website, gives almost a script to make it easier for parents to talk through, the birds and the bees with children, but it also speaks very particularly about pornography and about the access of the children can find online. Because I believe that we shouldn't only be talking about the biology of what happens in the birds and the bees talk, but we also should be preparing children that they can be exposed to pornography and what they should try to do if they are exposed. And these conversations should be had with children while they're still young. And that actually leads into the next part of my presentation, because I believe that parents have a very important role to play in the prevention of pornography exposure, because the younger child is more likely to accept the adult beliefs. So the younger child is influenced more by mom and dad and gogo and oma than they are influenced by their social world. So it's very important for parents to position themselves in the preventative space with younger children and to have these talks with them before the hormones kick in. If parents are able to have conversations with children around sex and sexuality, children see that parents are comfortable and that no topic is off limit. Whereas if a child reaches the age of about 8 or 9 and the parents have not had the conversation, they hear something at school, they're not necessarily going to go to the parent. They're going to ask a sibling or a cousin or Google. So it's very important that parents establish themselves as the people who are comfortable and the go-to people. And also important, if parents are giving negative messages around sex and sexuality, if they only say abstain because it's wrong, they will be imparting a negative value judgment to children. And then children are much less likely, if something goes wrong, to approach a parent. And that's when it happens that the parent is the last person to know if a child has been exposed to something inappropriate. So when children are young, we encourage parents to position themselves as guardians. They would be talking about, they would be having conversations about sex and sexuality, but they will also be managing all devices. So you'll be managing any device that the child has access to. Hopefully young children do not have access to smartphones, but they should still, everybody in the family who's in the family, their devices should also have the appropriate guardrails on. So if the child has an older sibling, we can expect that a younger child would be interested in an older sibling's cell phone. It's important that the older sibling's cell phone, in the case the child has access to it, should be having the appropriate software on it the parents' cell phones as well. I cannot tell you the amount of times where children have accessed inappropriate content on their parents' phones or on a grandparent's
Marita?
phone. Anissa,
Sorry,
yes.
Marita, I'm seeing some very um, important comments in the chat box. If you would bear with me, I'm just going to touch on some of them. So Celeste is saying that the problem is many caregivers are the offenders, exposures to porn and not safe and normalized by the kids' role models. And then so, I mean, if you give the talk, are those children more likely to seek help from their parents? Okay, so then we're also looking at the role of the parents in terms of their influence around children's sexuality. And then I think there was some comments about the whole birds and the bees talk, and I think we can agree that the parents' role needs to be a little bit more bolder or more confident when they discuss sexuality. And then Sandra is saying that I totally agree, hence why rape is escalating in South Africa and globally. Violence in every context is a normality. Furthermore, most children are groomed by family members who are perverts, victims grooming victims. Therefore, we need more awareness and education, especially in ECD, primary and secondary phase. So I think here this conversation talks a lot about the role of parents and the kind of influence that parents have in their children's sexuality and
Very important. Anissa, I just want to touch on something very quickly. And that is to say that we don't in South Africa know exactly, but we have a strong indication that child sexual abuse is perpetrated not only by adults. We suspect that close to 50% of child sexual abuse, the actor is another child under the age of 18. So I think it's very important that we start moving away from the idea that the perpetrator in cases of sexual abuse is an adult man. We have to say to each other that increasingly, and in America, there was a study that came out. If people are interested, they can pop me an email and I'll send you the study that showed that 65% of cases in one of the communities there that had been reported for sexual abuse, in 65% of those cases, the actors were other children. Harmful sexual behaviors is an absolute epidemic. And we have to, of course, it's a no-brainer. We have to prevent and deal with adults who are exploiting children sexually. But we have to look at children exploiting other children sexually because the balance is tipping. In Australia, for instance, indications are that it's also above 60% of cases that are reported, another child of 18 or younger is involved. So we have to start changing our thinking of the adult man who is the enemy. Harmful sexual behaviors are on the increase, and it's an absolute epidemic.
Marita, Nicole is asking, can you please talk about how parents can identify if their child has been abused and exposed to porn or if they are acting in ways that is developmentally natural?
Let's go through the presentation. You might get some ideas. Okay.
Okay, and then Advocate, while I've got you on, Advocate Reshwant is saying also kids learn more by role modeling on their parents rather than being lectured or told what is acceptable.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You cannot talk children out of misbehaving.
Yes. Dr. Shaida Umar is also giving some stats here. 46% of sexual assaults in South Africa are committed by children against other children in South Africa. So that reinforces what you're saying, Marita. Thank you, Dr. Shaida Umar. Okay, I think we're up to date with the chat box. Sorry, you can continue.
Thanks, Anissa. And I think I just want to, I know I've made the point, but I just want to underline that as a child protection, as a field of child protection, we really have to open our eyes to the danger of harmful sexual behaviors, because if we don't, we are not helping about half of the victims of child sexual abuse and exploitation. All right, so and something that's really shocking is that many schools don't have the appropriate protections or firewalls built into their school devices, if they have devices at school. And every now and again, we get a referral of a child who's managed to watch pornography and introduce other children to pornography on a school computer. So I think it's very important that parents also engage schools, and that schools should be really on top of protecting children and making sure that their devices are foolproof, so that we know that children are not getting exposed at school. It's also very, very important for us to limit children's screen use in much the same way as your chances to be in a motor vehicle accident will increase the more time you spend in a vehicle. Your chances to be exposed to some harmful content will obviously increase the more time you spend online. So I think it's very important that we look at the guidelines, and that we should go. This is the American Association for Pediatricians. These are their guidelines. And as you can see, from 7 to 12, 1.5 hours a day. So I really believe that we have to return to make sure, and we have to encourage and empower parents to set limits for screen time, and not only for pornography exposure, but also for overall health, because we know that increased screen use is related to a whole host of negative outcomes for children: less socializing, more obesity, diabetes, all the rest of it. So it's very important for us to keep to these guidelines. I believe very strongly that parents need to sit with young children, and they have to actively teach them internet safety. We often give children warnings, be careful of, but nobody actually sits down with children and actively teaches them. The child wouldn't necessarily, the younger child wouldn't necessarily understand instructions. So they need to be shown, and we need to make time, if the child has access to a device, that we make sure that they know how to use the device safely. And this should happen even if a child has access to a tablet. I see this so often, and it really hurts me tremendously as a grandmother to see a 2-year-old or 3-year-old who's given a tablet just to keep them quiet while the parents do something. It's not good for the child. It really isn't. And the child has access to a tablet, the child can have access to, they figure it out so quickly. So it's important to keep those screen limits and to not feel under pressure to give the child the device. Very often parents would say, yes, but we're living in a new kind of era. My child needs to have access to devices. Yes, sure. But as long as you're sitting with the child, as long as you're co-viewing, and if your child is under the age of 2, they have no business with a device.
Marita, we have a hand from Fatima. Fatima, do you want to unmute and share or ask? Fatima? Fatima, if you'd like, you can comment in the chat box. Before we continue, also, Dr. Shaida Umar, Selena is requesting possibly a link to that study that you referred to. Okay.
They're welcome to pop me an email.
All right.
I won't be able to find the link right now.
Okay. All right. So, Selena, you will get in touch with Marita or Dr. Shaida Umar. I think it's that study you're referring to. Okay, thanks.
We prepare young children for exposure to pornography by saying to them, some people put pictures, photographs, or videos of naked people on devices. So when you come across this, do your best to close or take the tablet, put it down upside down, or take your laptop, close it, and then to do your best to try and tell someone. So if you are at school and children are standing in a little circle and you can see they're on a device and you see that there's something inappropriate, do your best to leave the situation and tell. So we're not saying to children, you must run and tell, because we know that that's unrealistic. Many children will be unable to run and tell, and then they might feel that they've done something wrong. But try your best, do your best to leave and tell, do your best to pause, close, and tell. So parents act as guardians when children are younger, and as children become adolescents and they move into a new phase of development, parents will be acting as guides, because at this stage, children are developing their own identity, and their friends are not necessarily the people that they play rugby or tennis with. Their friends are also people that they meet online. People who influence them might be YouTubers or TikTokers, and these people become more influential than parents and schools. And we know that adolescents might know what the right thing is to do, but they're not necessarily going to do what they know the right thing is to do. Very interesting studies found that 98% of adolescents say that they would never post a sexually inappropriate selfie, but more than a quarter of them do exactly that. So we know that there's a disconnect between what they know to be a good idea and what they actually end up doing. So at this stage of a child's development, it's better to have accountability software than blocking software. So with accountability software, the child gets to explore different areas of the internet, but the parents are getting a report of where the child has been. So, and then they can have conversations with the child and say to them, I see you were on this site. Can you tell me what you saw there? Do you think this is harmful? Do you think this is healthy for you? So, because blocking software at this age is something that children are then going to find creative ways around the blocking software. And you'll be surprised at how clever children are to shake off the blocking software that their parents put in. All right.
Marita, I think also in the group, there's Itumileng, who was also talking about the importance of educating parents on how to engage children positively on, I know she's saying the topic, but I'm thinking around sexuality and responsible software use. And then also there's a comment from Irene about schools requiring children to have devices to facilitate their work. And I think your slides now kind of addressed how that use has to be supervised and managed well. I see Sandra saying, is it possible for us to work on a legislative law policy to promote child safety as an age limit to manage children in cell phones?
There is legislation at the moment sitting in Parliament that's not being written into law that would make a big difference in children's exposure to pornography. Shada might remember, I can't remember exactly what the legislation is called, but I think there's a lot of advocacy that can be done in this arena, because I don't think government has really cottoned on to the online harms on any level, let alone pornography. And I also believe that our big business partners and service providers are not taking nearly enough responsibility for what children are being exposed to. And worldwide, we're seeing a very exciting shift in all of this, big tech being held accountable for certain things, and social media bans coming into certain countries, which is very encouraging. And hopefully some of that will start happening in our context as well. Returning to what happens if a child has been, so we've spoken about how to prevent pornography exposure, and it really isn't rocket science. It really is about taking it seriously and taking common sense steps and being very intentional in giving your children access to devices. So we've spoken about some ideas around prevention, but what happens after the child has already been exposed to pornography? I think it's very clear that parents should not shame or blame children, because those children, if that happens to them after exposure to pornography, those young people are going to really, they might be punished severely. They're going to withdraw from the parent or the caregiver. It's as easy as that. If they feel blamed or shamed, it's not something that they're going to be discussing with that parent or accepting guidance from the parent anymore. So it's very important that parents, after exposure, communicate to children, we're in this together. Something bad has happened to you. We're going to figure this out together. And so that the child gets a message, you are supported. We're going to help you to make healthy choices. I think parents very often, if children have been exposed, they feel so isolated, they feel alone, they feel shocked, and they start looking for help. And it's very difficult to find help and support, which is why I'm so glad that all of you, I think we're on almost 150 participants now. I'm so glad that all of you are in this presentation today, because I know that you're going to be carrying out the message after today. And hopefully you're going to be downloading our guide as well and sharing that with other people, because we need to know how to support parents after exposure. Very often children who've been accessing pornography for a while would have started watching very unhealthy and very shocking things. So for parents, they can often be traumatized by what they see their children have been accessed. And it's important to explain to parents that the abnormal becomes normal for children over time, and that your child didn't start with bestiality pornography, but that was the way that the industry has entrapped them. When we talk to children about pornography exposure, it's important that we ask the hard questions. Otherwise, we're not going to get the full picture. You'll remember that we said right at the beginning, children tend to minimize their exposure to pornography. So it's important to ask some of the more difficult questions. And when you're in a working, for instance, in a therapeutic or some kind of intervention context with a child, you'll find in our guide, you'll find questions that you can engage children with to get an idea of what the exposure looked like for them. Because it's only if we know what children have been exposed to and the period of time that they've been exposed to it and how deeply they've become involved in it, that we can put together a treatment plan for them. So, and just to mention that some children might feel relieved when they can talk about what's happened, and other children might feel really guilty, and it might be a very difficult conversation with them. So I'm going to just briefly touch on the next few slides, but you'll get more information around that from our guide. When we try to...
I see Advocate Reshmant is also saying that parents need to be alert to prevent exposure of their children to both their family, adults, and relatives, and people who think it's good to talk about sex and pornography. And then I'm just going to update and see. I think Sandra's also saying, if there is a policy, can you assist me to campaign for the policy to be fully implemented?
Yes, as I said, I can't remember which legislation it is, but I'm more than happy to, if you pop me an email afterwards, just put you in touch with the people who know exactly what it is about. Okay. So when children have been accessing pornography, it's very useful if we're helping them and their families to try and figure out what got you to this point. So to say to children, is it, because very often children would have specific patterns of pornography use. Some children would watch pornography on the bus on the way from school to home. other children in the evening while mom is cooking, other children at night when everybody is sleeping. So there are very often things that happen in the environment for children. And we also find that there are some internal drivers for children. So some children might feel bored, some of them might feel anxious, some of them might feel left out. So we can then help children by trying to map out what the drivers are and then to address those drivers. And that would help then with the pornography use. So when we have problem use of pornography, it's very important to agree on a plan for situational prevention. You'll be astounded to hear how many parents where a child has been accessing pornography compulsively will give the child a terrible hiding, take the phone for a month, and then think that the pornography use is going to that's going to be the end of it. It doesn't work that way. We have to have a situational prevention plan. At what times do you have access to your device? Where can you go? What is the Wi-Fi? What access do you have to the Wi-Fi? And it's very important to agree on a plan for situational prevention, and both the parent and the child should be part of that plan. It's important to encourage children to use their time in healthy ways. So we actively try to get them to participate in sport, recreational activities, anything that can keep them busy in a healthy, constructive way. So instead of focusing on the pornography use, we're focusing on building an environment that is rich and healthy and fulfilling for the child. And then identifying possible remedies for inside and outside drivers. So if we see that a child is feeling anxious and that drives the pornography exposure, obviously we'll then try to address the levels of anxiety. And very
sorry, Marita, Advocate Reshwant is also saying, okay, so there is reference to the Child Care Act, but also note exposure to porn is first step towards sexual grooming by predators. And then Seth is again emphasizing the need to educate parents, particularly around sex and sexuality, the fact that parents don't feel comfortable to talk about sex. And to look at positive ways to develop healthy and inclusive sexualities.
I really think that that's a golden thread, throughout all of the comments that we've heard today from our participants, is getting parents on board. And certainly from my point of view, that is absolutely crucial. Getting parents on board is the first step to prevention. And getting parents and caregivers on board really is our first step towards any kind of child protection work. And I think that's where a lot of our energy should be going, in engaging parents and caregivers. All right, so the thought that I would like to leave with you when we are working with children who've been accessing pornography intentionally is that we should be focusing on a healthy settings perspective, and we should be addressing what's happening outside the child and what's happening inside for the child, internally for the child, to make sure that we're dealing with it. Focusing only on the behavior of the pornography searching is not going to be enough to shift things for that child. And then just to end off and to say, when children are using pornography compulsively, what most people would call an addiction, this is where professional help is definitely required, because the brain has already changed. And children at this stage would say to you, I know it's wrong, but I cannot help myself. If my phone is taken away by my parents, I will use my sister's phone, or I will get a friend at school to share their phone with me. So the brain has already changed. And at this point, we have to manage withdrawal, which causes anxiety or can cause aggression in children. So we have to manage the withdrawal of the pornography use. And it can be very useful for people to have, for this young person, if it's at all possible, to have a psychiatric workup. So, dear colleagues, I've gone through this presentation quite quickly, and I could hear at stages I was talking very fast. I hope that was okay with you, because I really, really wanted to share most of what was in this presentation with you. And I'm so happy that we've almost had no drop off from the beginning of the presentation to now. So hopefully people have been engaged. I'm happy we've got a few minutes left. I'm happy to take any last comments or questions. You'll also see that I've put my email address on here for you, and I'll be happy to engage with you if you have any particular questions pertaining to my presentation. And also just to remind you again of the South African Children and Pornography a resource that is on our website, amongst others. Oh yes, and also to say that there's a CPD accredited short course that's available for free, which will have less information than now, but if you are in need of CPD points, you're welcome to have a look at that as well. You'll find that on our Instagram.
Thank you so much, Marita, for that. I think I'm actually quite impressed. You got through over 50 slides in under 1.5 hours, which is really, really great. And I think that the pace was good. We managed to cover all the comments and questions. So I must say a job well done, not just in terms of the content, but the pace as well. I know that everybody took a lot from it. I still see some comments in the chat box, and I think there's one more hand. So I'm gonna look at that quickly, and then if for the next 5 minutes or so, if anyone else wants to come in and share or comment. So Selena is saying often a healthy sexuality is also a religiously loaded word and can be seen in very narrow ways, hence children seeking wider perspectives than what they are confidently told. By caregivers, how do we bridge the gap? And that's important because we look at influences like culture and religion often in how parents parent. Dr. Shaida Umar is also saying, agree with focus should be on promoting sex and sexuality as something to cherish and appreciate or value. So I think there's a lot of consensus around how parents approach the topic of sex and sexuality. Linda is saying the Amazing Bodies book helps a lot with creating, thank you for sharing a resource, with creating opportunities for discussions around healthy body image and sexuality as parents, if we also talk positively about our own bodies helps. And that's important because we also have to do reflections of our own as parents and educating other parents about doing the same. It's an ongoing conversation, not so once off. Kathy is saying, when my son was 11, somehow a man got hold of his phone number. He posed as a woman and started sending pictures. Pornography. He then asked my son to send him photos of himself. We found photos of my son with an erection on his phone. What a shock. Yeah, that is traumatic for parents also, and it's very, very scary. What happens sorry, so you can stop me, Marita, if you just want to come in and comment on some of them. I know I'm just going through it.
Kathy, I'm really sorry that that happened to you and to your son.
Thank you.
Yeah, and then Advocate Reshmant is saying what happens when parents themselves are the perpetrators. So yeah, there's very two sets of parents. You get those like Kathy shared, the trauma that goes with being a parent and having to deal with their children and their sexuality with unhealthy or inappropriate sexual behaviors. And then there's the parents who are the actors or the negative influences. So, yes. I don't know, Marita. Okay, so I know Advocate Reshmant asked what happens when parents themselves are the perpetrators. I don't know if that's, does Marita, do you want to respond to that before I continue?
Yes, I think that's a very tricky situation because parents, of course, can be perpetrators. Parents can use pornography to groom children. Anything is possible, but I think it's important that we just remember harmful sexual behaviors. We know that almost half of the sexual abuse of children in South Africa, another child 18 and under is involved, and that might be even more than the parental involvement. Anissa, I just also want to say thank you for facilitating this session. And I think the fact that we took the comments while we were presenting, I think made it more interesting to everybody. So thank you very much for the facilitation, and thank you everybody for staying on the call. I really appreciate it.
Hi, guys.
Thank you so much.
It's Sandra
Hi.
again. I've got my hand up, guys.
Yes, please go ahead, Sandra. I'm just going through
Oh,
all the, I'm
no,
just
it's fine.
checking. There
Thank
are
you.
still, actually, there's quite a few comments, but it's fine. Go ahead, and then
Okay.
we'll wrap up.
Okay. Thank you, Anissa. And thank you to the panel, especially to Marita for the presentation. As part of, on the board of mental health Zululand in the Zululand region, I deal with a lot of mental health disorders with children and of course with adults. But what saddens me is the kind of modeling the kids get from their parents and their family, the family environment is really disturbing in a sense that I'm a strong believer that generational curses can be broken and norms as well, can be broken. But unfortunately, in most cases that I deal with, if I must say in every case, it's the parents and the family members that are the perpetrators slash actors, as Ms. Redmeyer, says it. But to me, a perpetrator is a perpetrator, and we need to start calling it what it is. We need to call a spade a spade. I do understand, within the context, sometimes we need to have, but that's what's taking us back you know the leniency that we offer, that is often portrayed by the judiciary, by law enforcement, by the old, by the justice system as a collective, sometimes give a different meaning to the people who are causing these issues. And I strongly believe, that if we all come together and work together, we will achieve our goals and our purpose. Especially I especially chase women to empower other women because I believe women are the ambassadors of their homes and their communities. So as a woman empowerment, brand ambassador for Influential Women South Africa, I thrive on women empowerment, and also being a member of a global organization that's called WFN, the Wireless Female Network. We promote menstrual health care. And I was wondering from Marita if it's possible for her to, sort of, you know, sort of join us in strengthening our objectives because the objectives of Jelly Bean and the objective of the WFN is so similar in so many ways. So I also want to say before I leave is I will keep in contact. I've got your contact details and I would love to visit you in Pretoria and engage more on these topics. And thank you for a well presented presentation. Thank you and good luck to you.
Thank you
Thank you,
very much.
everybody, for all your wonderful and positive, encouraging comments in the chat box. I'm glad that you took from it. I want to say, usually we say, I hope you enjoyed the session, but I know it was a very sensitive sensitive topic, so I'm not going to use that word, but I am going to say that yes, we did take a lot from it. For those of you who asked, I see quite a few requests for the sharing of the presentation. Marita, if you're okay with it, we do share the presentation with people who attended our webinars, and also the recording we do it is available on our website, now on YouTube page as well. So for those of you who would like to refer back to the presentation or the recording. From my side, from the NSMSA side, we'd like to thank you again. We really appreciate the collaboration, and we look forward to ongoing engagement and collaborations. To everybody out there, thank you for attending, taking the time. We look forward to having you at our webinars going forward, and we wish you a pleasant day going forward.
Thank you very much, colleagues.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.